We've been fighting a long time, and we have all lost so very much, so many loved ones gone. But you are not alone. There are pockets of resistance all around the planet. We are at the brink. You have no idea how important you are. If you're listening to this, you are the resistance.
Ave Maria Stella, Dei Mater Alma, atque semper Virgo, Felix te porta.
Welcome everybody back. Steve with Suspidelium. I'm coming at you with another book review on Finding Frassati with Christine Wohar. Frassati, is it Frassati Inc., right?
Frassati USA.
Frassati USA. My apologies, mea culpa. On the great, blessed Pier Michelangelo Frassati.
Pier Giorgio.
Don't call him
Pierre.
Rule number 1 of Fight Club.
Chapter 2 in the book.
So, Christine, welcome back. We did another one on Blessed Pier Giorgio long ago, probably about a year ago now. And they told me about your new book coming out. I said, heck, yeah, let's do it. The more Giorgio, the better. So, welcome. Congratulations on the new book.
Yes, thank you.
So what made you do this one?
Well, this is my first book. I co-edited the book of Pier Giorgio's letters, but that's his book because those are his letters. And for a long time, everybody just said you should do a book. In fact, his niece Wanda had said to me one time, Christine, not only should you, you must. You must do it. So I think being in the position that I've got in, I've learned that if you stick around long enough, you become the expert. And so that's what happened. 15 years into this, I've had a lot of special experiences and great, off the record types of conversations and getting to know the accurate story behind a lot of the stories. I enjoy, sometimes people will tell me stories about Pier Giorgio, and I'm like, great story. Not one word of that is true, but I enjoy hearing you tell me with such enthusiasm. So some of these things may not have been stories that people have seen before because some of them are coming from a book that's not been translated yet into English. But for the most part, wanted to have something that's a little bit more calling people to holiness more than just reading about Pier Giorgio. So that really was the key, because the long title, Finding Frassati and Following His Path to Holiness, that's the two-pronged approach. I know there are a lot of people who still may not have heard of Pier Giorgio, but even those that do, it's not just really enough to know about him, but we should try to implement that spirituality. And in this culture right now, wow, we need people, men and women, in the spirit of Pier Giorgio.
Yeah, as everyone has him as the mountain climber. They do the sports with him, the Frassati athletic programs and things like that, but they don't talk about his love of Mary, his Eucharistic devotions, his care for the poor, sick, all that.
That's true. The first thing people think of is he was a mountain climber and fun. Yeah. Like the fun, relatable part of him, people really embrace. But especially now with how little devotion there is to the Eucharist, this is a guy who went to the Eucharist every day from when he was 12 years old. So that was a 12-year-old, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 20. I mean, that age range, imagine going every day with parents who really didn't even, his father never set foot, his father was a fallen away Catholic. So when you think about that Eucharistic model that we have in Pier Giorgio, if we all jumped on that bandwagon, wow, that would really transform the church, that in and of itself.
Yeah, you had a great story about somebody watching him, and he's taking notes of all the ways to stay awake in all-night adoration.
Yeah. Yeah, I got a kick. That is a testimony by a brother Lodovico, because Pier Giorgio they would have all-night adoration at a particular, in fact, today, the day that we're talking, is the feast of Saint Peter Julian Aymard. And I was just telling my morning prayer group, Peter Julian Aymard founded the Order of the Blessed Sacrament, the Sacramentini, who, there's a book in Italian that I picked up that I love. And it's all about how Pier Giorgio started Eucharistic adoration, but it was because of St. Peter Julian Aymard founding that community, and it made its way into northern Italy, into Turin. And so it was those Sacramentini, those priests, that religious community that had the all-night adoration. And so in that testimony of Brother Lodovico, that community after their name, I think, has SS. It just strikes me funny for other reasons. But they would have adoration for different groups. So there would be a student night, a worker night, and then some that were just a religious community. And in that story, Pier Giorgio showed up on the night that wasn't for students, but he insisted on spending the night. And then I did get tickled because I've been there, you're doing this and all the things you're trying to do. And that he called those his little holy tricks. Brother Lodovico watched him and said his little holy tricks that he would do to stay awake. So it's so human and so relatable. Those are the kind of stories that make me really love the example of Pier Giorgio, because I'm there with you. Wasn't it Saint Therese of Lisieux who said, like, if you fall asleep, it's okay, like the little Lord's watching you like your child?
Yeah. You go in not wanting to, but if you end up happening to, it's like, all right, let me go to adoration. It's time for my bedtime. Fine, don't even try.
I say sometime to a friend of mine, I don't think we're getting any credit. I don't think we're getting any credit for this. But then there are some of those saints who give us those assurances that, it's good. It counts. It's all good.
Yeah, the first time I heard about his adoration, it actually was Father Matteo Crowley's book, Jesus, King of Love. He writes about the Catholic Action League. And let's see, there was 4 Italians. Giorgio was one of them. The dentist, Giuseppe, I can't think of his last name. It's like 4 blessings, a couple saints, thousands of men doing it. And I was like, wait, I heard of that guy. He was the mountain climber guy, but no one ever told me about that he actually did adoration all night long with a bunch of other guys. That really wanted me to get like the Catholic actually started around here. It's like, hey guys, check this guy. He's a little bit more than surfing. And well, he didn't surf, but he sailed. Well, that was another one. I didn't know he was a beach bum. I'm a Charleston beach bum at heart. I love that chapter.
Yeah, he spent a lot of time at the sea, a lot. And I enjoy the fact that his relationships with the important people in his life, like when he would write to his father, he would often talk about the land. His father was very interested in agriculture, and he would write to his mother's close painter friend, Alberto Falchetti, and he would always talk about the museums and the art. But when he went to the sea, he would write to his Aunt Elena because she loved to go out on the water as well. So he spent a lot of time right there in Turin. Is the Po River runs through Turin. And that's where he was. The last time he was out before he died was a Tuesday. The week that he died, the last day that he actually was able to leave the house was a Tuesday. The guys, he went with some friends and they went out in a small boat on the Po River. So he spent a lot of time on the water.
Yeah, I could actually, when you were writing that, I was reading that chapter, I could picture him just sitting there looking out into the waves, and it's like, man, could just go down to Folly Beach, sit on a rock, and listen to waves come in. Nobody's around. It's like, yeah, you can really get into a deep mind. So thank God he's that big that he can create that gigantic mass of water, and you're just nothing.
Yeah. There's a great picture. There's a great picture of Pier Giorgio at the beach with his sister, and he looks very contemporary in what he's wearing, and his sister looks like miserable, but very modest, but miserable. But yes, I like to think of him at the beach.
You were also mentioned about he was 12 years old with the Eucharist Adoration, but his Marian devotion was even younger, wasn't it? With the flowers, cutting fresh bouquets for her, and even into his late teens, 20s, right?
Right. People. This is one of those Frassati legends that you read about, that when Pier Giorgio went and stayed at the family home in Polone, which that's where you would go now to find out anything, to immerse in Pier Giorgio. That's where I went, and where I met his sister when she was just turning 104, and where I would spend my long stays, because that's the family home that is still in the family. The one that was where he died in Turin is a bank now. So in Polone, it's up there at the base of the mountains, beautiful mountain flowers, and a mountain, the sanctuary of Oropa, which is rather large. He would go there, but people will say legendarily that he woke up every morning and ran up to Oropa for Mass and came back, which he didn't do that every day. Like his niece said, he would go when he came. When he went to stay in Polone, he would go. And then when he would leave, he would go to, say goodbye to his beloved Madonna there, but not every day. But all along that path are, beautiful little outdoor shrines like they do in Italy. It's one of those nice things about walking around Italy, and on a street corner, there's all of a sudden some beautiful artwork of the Blessed Mother. But his big devotion was Our Lady of Oropa up there, and he would bring flowers to her. That's one of the nice things I've always enjoyed when I stay at the family home, because they have beautiful flower gardens. And Pier Giorgio often would write about the flowers when he would write letters to his grandmother or something, that he's been down there picking the flowers. So I think he enjoyed them. And there are always fresh flowers from the family gardens in the rooms. I can see him just, swiping that bouquet and running up and giving it to Our Lady. Somebody said to me, well, where did he get the flowers in the winter? And I thought, that's a good question, but I'm sure there were, there are always winter flowers. We have we have pansies at least. So
yeah, something's around.
Yeah, there's something. And I like that description of him going in the snow even to take flowers to the Madonna.
Did his sister ever mention to you why that particular Marian devotion or statue?
Every region of Italy has their own Our Lady of something.
Yeah.
That's one of the nuances in the church that I think that must drive non-Catholics crazy. we have like a million titles.
Yes.
Our Lady of the Snow, Our Lady of this. I sometimes I think about that and go, what? Why do we do that? But I think in the regions, I know my Italian family, they're all very devoted to that regional Madonna. So this is a dark Madonna, a brown, it's the Madonna Bruna. They call her the brown Madonna, but it's one of the black Madonnas attributed to Saint Eusebius, who, having brought it there to that particular region of Italy. And today's feast of Saint Eusebius of Vercelli. I don't know if that's the exact same one who brought those statues. Oh, that's uncanny, the two things today. But he also had a great devotion to Our Lady of the Consolata, the beautiful, really beautiful shrine in Turin. So I think a lot of that was just the natural regional devotion.
Makes sense. Kind of like your sports team.
It's like your team.
Yeah.
So that's how they do it. I think in Italy is everyone has their Madonna.
Yeah, you read there was an article about, or not article, it was a chapter about his confession in the middle of the street. It read like that could have been part of a movie, that you just picture everyone walking by on a big day and he's just, hey, Padre, confession.
Yes. That's funny because one of my younger sister, she really liked that as well. And I think of that so vividly. I can picture him because I know this, the street that they describe, and I can just picture him just pulling a priest aside. When you think about it, I remember at some point in my lifetime when there was this move to going to confession face to face, and then you'd have like the side of the remember confessionals? Well, there's a concept. The side of the confessional for the screen and the side face to face. I think so. It wasn't even like a thing to informalize confession. And I know people have different opinions on that, but I think the idea was he was going to church. He wanted to receive the Eucharist the most worthily he could. He saw a priest and he's like, this will do.
Why not?
And the story was very uncomfortable. The priest was looking around the whole time like, who's watching us? He couldn't even focus. And there's Pier Giorgio just,
And that's in a Catholic, not just nation, but Catholic city too, that the priest was kind of put off. Imagine that happening you're in Nashville, downtown Nashville, or me in Charlotte. Just imagine Father being a little weird about that.
Well, it's funny you say that because I went to lunch with two priests and some friends. We had introduced these two priests. They were visiting, and we were at lunch in Alabama. And as soon as lunch was over, apparently the one wanted to go to confession and had asked the other one. And we kind of noticed. They said, "Oh, could you give us a minute?" And they did, right on the side of and it brought it to life for me because I was like, "Oh!" And so we walked away, and they were hearing each other's confessions. I think that was so right there in Alabama. Like, who's looking at that, thinking, "What are they doing?" So, yeah, that would have been a spectacle. I think that's the beauty of Pier Giorgio is they say that nobody ever laughed at him because he was who he was, and so he was so authentic. That I just think all he was thinking about was the grace. He wanted that grace, and he wanted to go worthily to the Eucharist. So
yeah, you mentioned in procession he was chest up, head up, proud to be walking in procession, and a time of fascism where people would yell at you for being Catholic. Again, in a Catholic nation.
Right, right. He endured a lot of things that we're going through right now. So I think that's another solace you can find in Pier Giorgio, is that he went through similar times. Just this, the rise of communism, fascism in his country, which made his blood boil to see it. And he was so disgusted with the Italian politics that he considered moving to Germany. This is pre-Hitler Germany. And
there was a great quote you had of the Germans in there about being he said they were very kind or warming or authentic or something like that.
Yes, I don't remember. It's his quote, right? Yeah. But I know what you're saying. He preferred to go there because they had not been tainted by all of the corruption. Of course, we think of Italian politics, we think of corruption, but I think he was more disgusted because he had joined the Italian People's Party that was supposed to be based on your Catholic principles. And so he was seeing men trample on their consciences just for political power. But right, he was very courageous going out in processions. He would be the guy that would be there to protect the procession with the Eucharist. And that's a beautiful thing when you're in Italy, because I participated in many of those processions. But when you think that it's a procession and people are coming to do harm, and somebody has to be the strong guy to be there to defend it and be fearless, that was Pier Giorgio. So yeah, far more than just a guy on the mountains having a good time with his friends.
He did a little bit more than smoke, play pool, and climb a mountain. You mentioned authenticity. There was one where you talked about him reading the Little Office, and people would ask him, "What are you doing?" And he'd just sit there in the middle, wherever he's doing, and just start doing the office.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that was that reminds me of another story that I don't think is in the book, but I tell it a lot, that Pier Giorgio was leaving church with his rosary in his hand, and someone saw him and accused him of becoming a religious fanatic because he actually had a sacramental and was carrying it in public, right? But the same thing with his prayer book. He would sit on the tram and read his prayer book and not give it a thought, because he was Catholic. He was just a Catholic guy. It was not like an adjective about him. It was a part of him, like his DNA. And so it didn't register to him that this is something you do in a certain place, right? It's wherever you are. I'm a Catholic wherever I am. So I'm not like a Catholic in church on Sunday. That's a big problem I think we have in our culture. We turn it on and off. For Pier Giorgio, there was no off switch. He was always on.
Yeah, you mentioned him doing the sign of a cross in the middle and on the street in front of the church, and people would yell at him, call him a name, moron. I think it was the name that they were used. And yeah, I mean, you don't have to go into this. You mentioned at the end of the chapters little tidbits or tips to do or ideas to do, like pray, make sure you do the sign of the cross before and after lunch or dinner in the middle of a restaurant. So not have to yell Benedici Che in the middle of the restaurant, but just do the sign of the cross and say a prayer. You might have somebody say, "Hey, that's pretty neat over there." What's that about?
That's what this book tries to do. I think that there are only a handful of books in English to begin with about Pier Giorgio. There are plenty in Italian, but they haven't been translated. And what most of the books you can pick up until this one are just like a straight biography that are usually translated or adapted from an Italian book. So this is one of the few, if not the first, that is written by an an English-speaking person, and with the prayer and the action steps to try to just not read about him, but put it into action. I was in the Turin train station one time, and that's my habit. It's always been, and that's because of my parents. You pray before meals, and never even gave it a thought. And I was in a crowded train station. There was a McDonald's. It was at the end of like 3 months in Italy, and I was going home, and I'm like, I just need something that's like something I'm used to now. And it was jam packed. Everybody had their luggage, and I finally found a spot, and I put my stuff there, and I made the sign of the cross, said the grace before meals, and started to eat. A young Italian woman came up to me, and she said, I just wanted you to know, after I had been eating for a little bit, she goes, I just wanted you to know how much that meant to me to see you make a sign of the cross. And she had just come from a Catholic retreat, but she was not able to do it. And so then we had the most beautiful conversation, and it made a friend. And then I went on the train and I had the same thing happen. A girl in the compartment across from me saw that I was praying the rosary. And so it made her feel comfortable to talk to me. And I thought those were 2 encounters that I had that day that were simply because I prayed and wasn't afraid to do it. And I think that is how Pier Giorgio did it all the time. And so I'm not Pier Giorgio level, but I think that's the whole point of this book too, is that we don't have to worry about being the saint on the top all the way and at the highest level, but just take the baby steps. I like to say we just do the fundamentals after time. Like even this is a case where doing the fundamentals myself in time, I've gotten to know Pier Giorgio so well. So we have to practice. We have to try to be Christian.
Yeah, just be you, but be you greatly, and just be you. Don't be scared of being you. And if you love somebody, you want to tell somebody else about it. Just like he had this book on, was it Catherine of Siena, that for evangelization purposes.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he loved to read the dialogue. I love that story because here he is, just going to visit a friend, and he's carrying his book with him, and he just is thinking about how beautiful it was that Catherine of Siena was able to talk with God. And so excited that he pulls it out to read it to his friend, and to share his enthusiasm and how she was able to talk with Christ. And then it was almost prophetic, right? Because he dies a few days later. And so he gets to have that chance to talk with Christ. But and that's a great story, because Pier Giorgio believed that the apostolate of persuasion is the most beautiful and the most necessary. That's almost before his time in a way. It's an otherworldly wisdom, because survey after survey always show that the most influential people in our lives are our peers, right? Like your parents, as parents, you can tell your kids everything, but so-and-so down the street says this or that, all of a sudden it's true.
Happen all the time. I remember buddies of mine, they trying to teach somebody to hit, they go, and the next guy down the street says the exact same thing, goes, I've been telling you this for 5 years.
Right, exactly. Your parents are always wrong. It takes you a long time to figure out, but yeah.
And he was a big fan of hers, and Peter Martyr. That was one that I didn't know when I was reading your book. I didn't know Peter Verona, that he was at least a fan of his. I got his photo on top of the altarpiece behind me. I got his palms over there for the blessed palms to protect the house from storms and oppression, which I don't know if anybody knows about it. I got it on the website. I've seen storm clouds go from red, break up, go around, and form back on the other side every time. Hurricanes turn right. Things like that. In Denver, I gave it to a lady. She was a skeptic. She planted them. She was the only house in her neighborhood that didn't need a new roof after a hailstorm. She asked for a couple more later. But he loved the Dominicans because he was a tertiary one, right?
He was, and on that note that you're saying, we should all use sacramentals a lot more. I think Pier Giorgio was big on that. I think that's one of the things that my priest now, he talks about a lot. And I think that's something that some people have really gotten away from. But I think we really, really need to return to sacramentals. Yeah, I think Pier Giorgio, he was very influenced he was every man, He was influenced strongly by the Jesuit fathers, who actually got him started on daily communion and actually introduced him to his charitable work with the conferences of St. Vincent de Paul. But he lived in Turin, where the Salvatorans were Don Bosco's beautiful shrine in. And so he went to confession a lot to the Salvatoran priests. He was influenced by the Dominicans, I think, so much because they were the ones who were doing most of the preaching. One of his nieces said that you don't remember, you're not old enough, but there were times when people weren't even supposed to didn't have the whole Bible in their houses. And so this is where they learned the scriptures, was through the Dominicans. And so the Dominicans were a big presence in Turin. There's a very old church there, San Domenico, which I mentioned casually in the book, where he, in the side altar, professed as a lay Dominican. So he had it's interesting that there is a connection there to Peter Verona, Peter Martyr, so which would be one of his name saints in a way.
Raise it up. There he is up there.
Okay.
I got a palm behind there that I taped to the thing. Just Yeah, like I said, it worked. Every time a storm goes, hey, St. Peter, protect the house and protect the family. And
Sadly, I think that church is not being run by the Dominicans right now. I think for some reason there was some, just with the whole thing with the vocations and all of that. So, but that is one of those churches. It's only open for a couple of hours. If you get to Turin and can get in there, you have to time it just right for when it's open. But yeah, so there was a strong Dominican influence in his life. I relate to Pier Giorgio in that regard so much because I was raised and still am Byzantine Catholic Eastern Rite, but we went to the Latin Rite, the Roman Rite, grade school and high school our whole lives. I consider myself like a spiritual mutt because we had a lot of variety of spiritual influences. And one of the Byzantine priests would always get upset that people never know about the Eastern rites. It's not even on their radar. And he would say, the church breathes with both lungs. And so I see in Pier Giorgio, he had influences by a lot of different charisms of different religious communities. And I like that about him because even though he encouraged his friends to join the lay Dominicans, he was frequently in contact with priests from all of those different communities. So I think that all is reflected in his spirituality, his love of the poor, his love for scripture, his love, he was so many facets to him because he had so many rich spiritual influences.
Yeah, I love the playing pool and betting on it that if I win, you're going to church for me.
Yeah, Pier Giorgio's stories with his friends, that would be a great thing to write about. It would take a little bit of effort to understand his sense of humor, the things that he would write. He would write these things called proclamations. I actually do one of those once a month. Our mailing list, I send out a proclamation. Actually, it comes out the first Thursday of the month. And that comes right from him. But he would just in writings to his friends, once you get to know him, they're hilarious. And the practical jokes that they played on him too are really funny. So that is something that we know more peripherally, I think, about his sense of humor and his practical jokes. But I think they would have gotten it completely when he would make a wager for them to go to church. I mean, he meant it, and I'm sure he made them, pay up and go with him. But he had a lot of fun things that he would do that I think his friends, that was. Yeah, he was a Pied Piper in many ways and an instigator in many ways. His good friend Marco, they had to be separated a lot of times because of their inability to stop laughing and horsing around. But when he was in front of the Lord in church, he was the example of reverence. So, and we need all of it, right?
Yes.
We've lost this collective sense of humor, it seems, lately. And I think that's another reason why he's such a terrific guy for our times, is remember how to laugh.
Yeah, I talk about it all the time. I'm a quote unquote trad, but I can't stand that. I go to afterwards and no one likes laughing. Everyone's stoic or serious. And I remember talking to one guy years ago, and to get off, and the girl I was dating at the time, she goes, "How was that?" I go, "That tree had more personality than that dude." I'm just going, come on, you got to be able to laugh and enjoy and have a good time with it. And it seems like he enjoyed the outdoors. His family, he put his family first above pretty much everything else other than our Lord, right?
Yeah, and Pier Giorgio had a difficult family life. It comes up in the book as well. With his parents had a stressful relationship. They were actually on the verge of separation at the time that he died, but stayed together afterward because of that. But yeah, he had his priorities in order. I don't think there's any question. And the beautiful thing about that is he wasn't supported at home. I've shared before that I came from a solid Catholic home. And my dad was the spiritual head of the household. In fact, when he passed away and I was going through his paperwork, I shared with my brothers and sisters how much so he was. Because my mother was 100% Italian, so you just kind of figure she was calling the shots. My dad was a more calm guy, but you can see in their communications and everything, really the spiritual head. And Pier Giorgio was forced to be the spiritual head of his household because he didn't have that spirituality in the home. And so yet he was able to take that and radiate that. It's incredible, really, the example that he sets for us in so many different ways.
Yeah, my grandma, my mom's side of family, we come from Naples, and my grandma's house, we always jokes, and you could genuflect in front of the house. And if you came inside, everyone got a big loaf of bread to go with it.
But even though his parents didn't have the spirituality that he had, as you say, it was his priority, his family. He did things. One of the hardest things that he had to do was obey his father when he was about to graduate and wanted to go and work in the mines as a mining engineer. His father wanted him to work at the paper. Mm-hmm. And that's a beautiful story that when his father sent an executive, a managing editor to Pier Giorgio to tell him, your father expects you to work at the paper. He said that with tears in his eyes, Pier Giorgio said, if this will make my father happy, then tell him I accept. And one of the most widely misunderstood stories about his budding love for Laura Hidalgo and how he renounced that love because he didn't want it to be a stressor in his parents' relationship. So not because they made him do it. And I try to explain that. It's so confusing what people understand about that, but I try to give the right story in the book. But it was out of love for his parents and his family, as you say, like it was a priority. He understood, God and first, obviously, but his family was key to him.
Even your points at the end of the chapters were great about, make sure you call your, or say prayers for your mom or dad and offer a rosary for them, or your grandparents, light a candle. I'm going, even just something as simple as that, I was like, wow, I didn't even think about that. That's a great idea.
Yeah, and Pier Giorgio's grandmother, Linda, the one who died a few days before him, she was the one that had more of the spirituality in the family, and she would teach him those things, like to remember to pray for the dead, and some of the things that he did and how faithful he was to remembering people who had lost loved ones. I especially, now that my parents are gone, and I think that when certain people go through different tragedies, you get in a club that you don't want to be in, like when everybody loses everything in the flood, you're one of those people that lost everything in the flood, or, you've lost a child, you're in that club of people who have lost a child, and not necessarily clubs, I say clubs, like, groups that you want to be in. And I think the same thing's true when you lose your parents or your loved ones. Like Pier Giorgio's mother lost her mother and her son within a span of a few days. And I think, we probably need to think a little bit more about how important those relationships are and nurture them and cherish them, because when they're gone, they're gone. And when he was gone, it left such a void in the family and in the circle of friends, to the point that even his family was so stunned to see the outpouring of people when he died, to say even we didn't know our son, like they didn't even have that appreciation of him when he was alive. And some of that, I think, is just the way things are. You always see your parents as your parents. You don't see them as people. Yeah. Are they really people? And then when it's too late, you see them as people. I find myself so much now thinking about my parents as people rather than my parents. And I think Pier Giorgio really treasured the people in his life. And so that's why there is, in fact, because he did, and he wrote so many letters to them and was such a great communicator, and that's why we have the richness of all of the words that he used, which is every one of these reflections in the book starts with something that he wrote or said. You
even got his text messages. What?
Yeah. Right. And we have that because he was so concerned about his family and friends. Yeah. I mean, he was constantly keeping in touch with them. So, these are good lessons. I try to have little action steps that are doable, because I don't like to read books where it says things that I know I'm never going to do. Yeah. I mean, it's like, that sounds good, but I'm never going to do it.
Yeah, everything you have in there action-wise was very doable. And by the way, when I meant text messages, guys, it transcripts, it was condensed to short words, 10 words or whatever like this. Kind of like a text message.
Telegrams. Yeah, telegrams.
Telegrams, yeah. What was the story... Now, I know you've told me one, and I won't ask you to tell that one because it's might be controversial. But what is the story that didn't make the book that you wish you could have put it in there?
One of the things, I wouldn't say a story, but one of the things I wished I had written more about was Pier Giorgio's chastity, because I think it's a big element of his spirituality that would have probably been a good thing to bring out more in the book. When he died, the people who heard his confession, the priests would say they could assure you that he was chaste until he died. And I think it's something that to look at a guy like this who had wealth and a lot of opportunities and friends and all of that, to be really crystal clear with people that he was a pure living Catholic man, and that while he enjoyed life and did all of these fun things and had a wide group of friends, even when he had that relationship with Laura, she never really knew about it, because he would, if he wrote her a note, he would write a note to like 3 or 4 other girls so that it would look like, I'm just writing to all my friends. In other words, he protected so much the reputations of his girl friends. He respected them so much so that he didn't want to have any innuendo or suggestion about them. And I think we do a lot of joking about things that are really inappropriate. And that was something that never entered into his mind. It was the opposite. He respected the girls that he was friends with. He has a great line about, after parents and sisters, how beautiful friends are, how much they influence us and how much they guided him, precious guides for his whole life. So I think if I would have added one more chapter, I would have liked to have dwelled on that, because I think, especially like, again, in this culture now, even how we go to church, there's so much immodesty even in the church. So I like when you look at pictures of Pier Giorgio, he looks like the Catholic gentleman. Yeah. And he acted like the Catholic gentleman. So sure, he had a good time. He was on the mountains. He knew how to play practical jokes. He did all of those things. But even in his how he recognized the dignity of the poor, when his friends would go with him to these miserable places where he would go, and they would be like, can't we just go in the family car, ride in, bring the stuff and leave, kind of, because they didn't want to deal with the stench and of the slums or the filth. And he would say, you don't approach a poor person that way. You approach them with dignity. So I think all of his relationships, he recognized the true dignity of every person. So whether it was a relationship with women that he wanted to preserve their relationships, their integrity, so they wouldn't have anybody casting aspersions on them. I think it's really an important point, because we should protect reputations of each other by not creating temptation for people by the way we dress and talk and act. And I think that was a big part of his spirituality that is not discussed much, and unfortunately I didn't do it either.
And maybe there'll be a second book on that, or a continuation one.
The video is better than the book, right? Because now I covered it.
There you go. Yeah, but you don't become incorrupt for...
is key.
I'm sorry?
No, I do think it is a key component of who he was.
Oh, yeah.
And it's something I overlooked, yeah.
You don't become incorrupt for, how many? It was 80 years plus, just by climbing mountains. So there's more to him than just, mountain climbing and sailing.
Right.
Well, Christine, that's great. The show notes underneath will have the book links, along with the FrassatiUSA.org website. Sign up for the newsletter. She's got what all you got on the website?
The website is there are a few sections there, and what I try to do is make it the most accurate source of information about Pier Giorgio. But when you go on, the very first thing you will do is it'll pop up with a 15-minute video on Get to Know Him. Everybody should watch that video at least once. And then you can immerse into all of the different aspects of his spirituality biographically. There are places to connect with other groups that are out there formed with the patronage of Pier Giorgio. Find a Frassati group in your area, learn a lot of the prayers. We have a bookstore that portal on the homepage, because that goes directly to the sister servants of the Eternal Word that do all of the Frassati shipping and things. So yeah, the goal of that website, in addition to people being able to find information, is to know that when they go there, they're going to find accurate information. So
very good. Well, Christine, appreciate your time, and congrats on the book. And again, the show notes will have the book and the website in there. And take care. And thanks for coming on. We'll do it again another time.
Thanks. It's good to see you again. It's
yes, ma'am. You too.
I'm an old friend. I appreciate it.
Amen.